Weapons. What is it about? It's an interesting movie. It's gonna be spoiler heavy, but there's a couple things that are really clearly spelled out, which are which are the nature of the bad guy. It's written in big red letters on Justine's, the teacher's car at the beginning, which, and then the term parasite is used quite often. So that's spelling out what she's doing. She is draining life energy. So if you pay attention to those clues, very clear what the most surface level plot of the movie is. There is a witch who is draining energy. The marketing, um, creepier than the movie. I went in thinking it would be a little scarier than it was, which is good. I think having just a little bit of misdirection in the marketing is good because then you have not seen the movie before you have seen the movie. So I am glad my expectations were not exactly what happened. Um, so we were one of the easiest reads for this movie is that it's about gun violence. I think the director has said that wasn't their intent, but it's kind of hard to watch this movie and not have that read. Um, so you have a classroom of missing children. You have and one child survives and one teacher survives. That's the setup we start with at the start of the movie. And you have a scene of like parents meeting in the school to like work through their grief, and you have a dream sequence where there's a very prominent, enormous AR-15 floating over someone's house, and so, and then that idea connects with some of the other themes in the movie. Another theme in the movie is this idea of how all of the layers of society that are meant to protect children fail them. We have these missing children. We have a child, Alex, who is clearly having issues at home, but his every layer is missing, right? So his parents are there, but they've been cast a spell on. They're absent emotionally, intellectually. At the start of the movie, they're great, and then spells cast, and they're not present. So his parents fail to protect him from the witch. There's the level of the school. The school is meant to be able to protect him, but the school fails. When all the other kids go missing, they don't even allow his teacher to comfort him or to talk to him. Um, so this is a layer of authority that's meant to protect him that's not doing that. Um, you have the teacher is meant to protect him, but she has her own life. It's messy. She has her own issues she's dealing with, but she tries. She just her own mess gets in the way. Then we have the police who are corrupt and and police. Toby Huss, already the strongest man in the world, is the chief of police, and then there's another police officer who plays a role who's kind of a jerk, and so the police are not there to do anything to help. The police are not going to save us here. Um, and then so that layer of society is failing, and then there's the layer of community and society that's also failing. So you have um, the community at large is covering this up and downplaying it and keeping it out of the news, and or so the opening narration tells us. So we also have the layer of society at large is failing these kids or this kid. So we see these images of a neglected child who's having to take care of his parents and feed them soup and dealing with things on his own, and he's left to his own devices, and ultimately he's the one who solves the problem in the movie. Um, so all of these people and things that were meant to um, save him and protect him have failed. And it's hard not to have the read that the movie is at least thinking about gun violence without that. And it's not subtle with some of those other things, like having the word witch written on the car in the beginning. So having the floating AR-15 is basically like, okay, subtext is for losers. This is what this means. Um, so that's one read of it. I think there are other things going on. So there's Josh Brolin, like Thanos, is one of the dads, and he's grieving his and it's kind of like his take on masculinity is critiqued, not not verbally, right, but it's in the text of the movie. So his wife is kind of a non-issue. Uh, he is off on his own. He's falling asleep in his kid's bed every night. Once a kid went missing, so this is like trying to feel close to the kid. Um, and he is accusing the teacher of being a witch. He's the one who writes it on her car. He he is like falling behind at work, and then so he like decides he's going to take things into his own hands. Um, and this is kind of where we see the police failing because they haven't done very basic investigative steps that he is going to take, like looking at the camera and seeing what direction in video footage of the kids going missing they're walking in. All the kids wake up in the middle of the night and go walk in um, one particular direction, and so he goes and asks one of the other parents for a copy of their footage, and the mom is there, and she's like, "No, I'm not comfortable with that." And then he waits outside. He's mad. He's not going to listen to her. And then the dad shows up and he asks him, and the dad does it. And so he's like ignoring women. He's accusing Justine, another woman, of of being a witch, of being knowing more than she's saying. And then when she's in trouble, he steps into a protector role, and like there's someone who's been weaponized to attack her, so he like gets in the way and stops that guy and like protects her. Um, and it turns out, at the end of the movie, he reunites with his son who had gone missing, and his son was the kid who had bullied Alex, the protagonist kid, the main kid. So, we see where that kid is getting it from, and it's kind of showing him in a negative light in some ways, but also like he's it's being played for laugh. It's a little bit. Everyone is messy. I think that's another part of what the movie is saying. Like none of the police and none of the teachers are people who are actively evil. They just have their own things going on. The principal is at home watching documentaries with his husband, and he just wants to be left alone and do his own thing. And teacher is an alcoholic; she's dealing with that. And there's a police officer who's like, "I'm not a detective. This isn't my job. I'm not supposed to be doing this." And he's also like phobic of needles, and he gets stabbed by a junkie, and he's worried about that, and he's cheating on his wife. And there's the police chief, already the strongest man in the world. He's like, look, just leave this to us. We're the experts. We know what we're doing. And they clearly don't, but that's the explanation he's always going to start with. So there's that element of like everyone has reasons for what they're doing, which is their own lives are a mess, and they can't find time to take care of these children. So the witch story is, it's a witch story. She kind of only has one spell, or two, I guess. One turns people into thralls so that she can drain their life energy. They don't show her doing that. It's just implied by all the parasite stuff. And then one that turns people into weapons. Hence the title of the film, where and that's what her downfall is in the end, is Alex, the kid, watches her do this, and then, she needs something from a person, like a hair, and then she like wraps it around this thorn with the hair of the person she's controlling, and then like pokes herself so she gets some blood and smears it all over the hairs and then snaps it, and then they go attack the person. So the kid watches that and does that, and finally the kids attack her. Um, so she's the one who's going to get uh, torn up by the kids. So you have this kind of comedic chase sequence at the end where she's like bursting through houses and stuff. And like again, none of the neighbors are that worried. Um, I think that's another layer of society that failed here. Is this kid's neighbors don't notice that all the windows have been in his house have been blocked off, and they don't notice that he's coming home to an empty house. His parents aren't showing up to work. Any of these things that should be red flags are not showing up as red flags to people. So they see like a group of 20 kids running through their house and breaking out the glass windows and stuff. They don't care. They don't say anything. So there's a read of this as the older witch being like older generations leeching off the young, and draining the young to maintain themselves. I don't think that's as in the text of the film as some other as it could be, but it's definitely there. So the witch is ancient. She tells the principal, "Oh no, Alex's parents have a touch of the consumption," which works in two ways. The first way is it's like, oh, I'm consuming them, so it's a hint as to what she's doing, and the second is it's like an indication as to, okay, she's not actually a member of this family. She's just been lying to people in this family that she's a distant aunt or whatever for a long time. So she's ancient. She's been lying to them. She's not. She's just exploiting people. And there's a couple things that just aren't super explained well, like why she keeps Alex alive, or not magicked. Um, she's not if she's not actually like a family member, why does she care? I don't know. There's a couple little things like that, but it's a kind of movie where like you don't worry too much about the logic of that stuff. Like, they have Alex going to grocery store on his own. He's an 8-year-old kid buying all this soup to feed his parents, and then later feed all the kids. And then you can't sit there and be like, okay, he's feeding them soup, and that's how they're surviving for this long. But they're not. They don't need to use the bathroom. Like, wouldn't they be covered in feces and urine and stuff? And it's like, I just don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's a gruesome enough movie. They could have done that, but they decided not to. That's fine. 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 We're not going to do that. I'm not going to tell that story. So, stuff makes sense. Stuff doesn't make sense. The storytelling mechanism, it kind of jumps between the same story from different people's perspectives, which is, it's not the thing where it's like different people are counting the story and they remember different details. It's just like it focuses on different aspects of things. So, like when you get Justine, the teacher's perspective on things, and she goes to a bar to drink, she has a conversation with this guy who used to be her drinking buddy, who's the cop. And he says, I'm not with my wife anymore. We're off at the moment. And she's like encouraging him to drink, and she's having fun. She remembers the conversation she has with him, and then having fun waking him up in the morning in like a goofy way. Then we get his perspective. Like, spouse says, okay, I'm going on a trip. I'll be back on this date. And so actually he is still with the wife. And then he gets to the bar, and you don't really see any of the conversation. from his perspective, but then you do see them having sex, which was skipped over in the other perspective. So his focus is more on the sex and less on the conversation. Um, so, it is interesting to see these things shown from other perspectives, kind of gradually unveiling, what actually happened. I think you've got that figured out about halfway through the movie, or if not earlier. Um, like it's not subtle, so um, I can see some people disliking that storytelling convention. I think it works well enough here. Um, I think I can see some people being a little like not totally on board with are the tonal shifts. So the tone does shift at times between, and this is something the director did in his other movie, Barbarian, um, where you have a very scary tone intermixed with humor, back to scary, back to humor, and there's a few times like that, like the Thanos is fighting the possessed guy, the guy who's a thrall of the witch, and he keeps knocking the guy out, and the guy keeps like getting back up and attacking him, and he knocks him out again and gets back up and attacking him. It's timed like a comedy scene, so there's a little bit of that, and I think some things that the how you interpret it depends on is what's going to see if you see it as funny or as scary. So you have the final chase scene with the witch where the kids have been set upon her by Alex, and then she's kind of screaming and running as fast as she can, and she gets torn apart by the children. That's either like kind of funny or scary depending on where you're sitting, I guess. So I think that might be a little bit divisive to people depending on how you like, whether you get what the director's doing or not, or whether you vibe with it.